Coming up on this episode of Common Denominator.
But my mother, with my hand in hers, looked me in the eyes and she said to me, "Baby, do you want to die?" And I looked back at my mom and I said, "Mama, I don't want to die. I want to live." And her response was, "Good, baby. Look at me. You take the hand of God, you walk the journey with him, but you fight like you never fought before. Your Father and I will be with you. You will not be by yourself, but you got to do your part. You got to fight. You got to fight."
Hi, and welcome to Common Denominator, where we focus on human connection and what brings us together. I'm Moshe Popack, and today, a story of courage, hope, and gratitude that will leave you inspired. As a 9-year-old boy, John O'Leary was burned on 100% of his body and given less than 1% chance to live. His amazing journey of survival illustrates the incredible power of the human spirit. Today, John is the author of the national best-selling books On Fire and In Awe. He's the host of the top-rated Live Inspired podcast, and he's an inspirational speaker who has taught millions of people around the world how to live inspired. He's also a business owner, writer, a husband, and a father of 4. Before we chat with John, a quick reminder that if you like the show, please subscribe and follow me on social media at @mpopack. Now, here's my conversation with John O'Leary. Enjoy. Thank you, John, for joining us on Common Denominator.
No, man, I am thrilled to be on. So I'm excited to lead where you want to go next.
So before we get into the interview, really tremendous gratitude from me because I reached out to Dave, my producer, when I heard your story, and we're going to get into your story. So I wanted to say thank you before we get into that, because your thought, your speech, your action, you're living a life of service. So thank you for that.
Well, I think as folks hear my story today, one thing that will become very apparent is how unimpressive John O'Leary individually is. And that's not like a cute, funny first line shot across the bow. It's sincere. I look, whether it's physicality or financially or mistakes I've made academically or in relationships, in parenting, like just about anything, I trip my way forward slowly, haltingly, and awkwardly towards success. But what makes the story memorable and meaningful is how people have supported John, what they have taught me and us, and what it means for the rest of us going forward as we lead our lives. So if I'm a servant, it's because I've been well served.
So I want to go back to 9 years old for all of us that don't know your story. Take us back to 9 years old. You're a child, and you're playing with matches, right?
Yes.
In your garage.
Even the way you set it up, most people are like, what in the world has this boy done? And probably your male listeners are like, yeah, me too, man. Because little boys in particular, if you grew up in the Midwest and have a little bit of land to run on, you got into some trouble early. So about a week before I got into trouble myself, I saw boys in my neighborhood playing with fire and gasoline. And Moshe, they were 11. I looked up to them. I figured if they could do it, so could I. So I waited about a week, made my little plan. My father's at work. My mother's out. The house is mine. Walked into the garage, lit a piece of cardboard on fire. And as you hinted and alluded to, before I could even start pouring the gasoline out, the fumes, which is the truly flammable stuff of gasoline, the invisible stuff, came out, created a massive explosion, split that metal can, 5-gallon can, in two, picked up the child, and launched me 20 feet against the far side of the garage. So that's the beginning part of this epic tale that should have cost me my life, but miraculously and through the gift of others, did not.
So here you are. I guess from what I understand, most of your body is, you're in the hospital and most of your body is burned, right? You're in the trauma center. What is those initial conversations with your parents? Like, I mean, there's probably so many different emotions that are going on.
Well, yeah, so many. And for me, actually not that many, only one. So the only emotion I had that morning was, oh my gosh, my dad is going to kill me when he finds out. because dad wasn't home, mom wasn't home, the house was mine. I blew up the can. I burnt down the house. And so, yeah, you mentioned, John, you were burned on most of your body. Like the reality is I was burned on 100% of my body. 87% were third degree. It is truly a death sentence. But at age 9, I wasn't thinking about that. I was thinking about my dad. And dude, this guy's going to be mad. And then I hear his voice. And a lot of times folks will ask, like, do you remember any of this? And like, yeah, I'm telling you what happened. These are the memories emblazed into my mind. Like, you don't forget moments like this. So I hear his voice down the hall yelling at some nurse, "Where is my boy, John?" And I could hear like the anger in his voice. And I'm like, man, I hope they don't show him back here. But they did. They bring him back. They pull back the curtain. My father, who was a business owner and a father of 6 and, just a champion of human beings, man, he was a great guy, marches into this room, puts his finger in my face, and then he says very sternly to me, "Moshe, John, look at me when I'm talking to you." So I look up, and then he goes, I have never been so proud of anyone in my entire life. And my little buddy today, this morning, I am simply proud to be your dad. And then he goes, I love you, and there's nothing you can do about it. As a little boy, I'm hearing these words thinking, oh my Lord, like nobody told my dad what happened. Like the old man doesn't know I burnt down the house, man. And yet for the parents in the room and for the guardians in the room and the aunties and uncles and fellow human beings in the room, you know about grace and love. But at age 9, I wasn't super familiar with it. It changed me. His gift of love was the first step in the journey. And you asked in your question, John, do you remember the conversation with your parents? Both, yeah. So my dad's was all about love, but so was my mom's. Hers just came about it completely differently. They eventually ushered my father out of that room, and a moment later, my mother walks in. And you got to understand, for the moms and dads in the room, like, this is a very messy situation. I'm burned on my entire body. I am dying, and they're not ready for this. So even the ability to walk in and see this the first time takes your breath away as a clinician, let alone as a parent. So my mother boldly walks in, and I remember she took my hand in hers, which takes a lot of courage when the hand was as mangled as mine was. She starts patting my bald head. All the hair had been burnt off. And then she says, baby, I love you. I just love you so much. And so I look up and I say, Mom, will you knock it off with the love? Am I going to die? And when I asked her the question, Moshe, I was pretty sure she was going to say, you're fine. We're going to get you out of here today at noon, and we'll swing you through Steak and Shake on the way home and get you a chocolate shake, man, with a cherry on top. I assumed she would provide me a little bit of encouragement. And instead, what she gave me was truth, which I appreciate about you, because that's what you're trying to impart on your listeners. Just truth, which we don't always want to hear. But my mother, with my hand in hers, looked me in the eyes and she said to me, baby, do you want to die? This is your choice. It's not mine. It takes a lot of courage. And I looked back at my mom and I said, Mama, I don't want to die. I want to live. And her response was, good, baby. Look at me. You take the hand of God, you walk the journey with him, but you fight like you never fought before. Your Father and I will be with you. You will not be by yourself, but you got to do your part. You got to fight. You got to fight. And so the two conversations that I had with my parents were both all around love, but one was the more feminine, if you will, type of love of just embracing and accepting and grace. The other one was this more masculine, tough, appropriate version of accountability. Do your part, dude. You're not on your own, but you got to do your piece. And both are critically important in our journey forward.
I love I'm just actually a little emotional right now when I'm hearing your story. First of all, just for the listeners, I'm thinking about parents in that moment. Imagine if your fear of your dad would have been, he would have said something negative instead of just pure unconditional love. And that is a pause for all parents, right? When they're dealing with their children, they don't realize it's such an important time. And then I also appreciate tremendously the idea of sometimes people have to make decisions, or sometimes things are super, super hard. They know it, and it took me many, many years of writing and journaling to understand that actually people would rather live in known lies. They know it's a lie because the pain of the truth is too great,
Right.
and that really just rings so true to me.
Well, you and I were talking earlier about addictions, and I have a friend who runs the most successful alcohol recovery clinic in the country, and it's up east, up in outside of Boston. And one of the reasons for his success, this guy who runs it, is he asked the question, "Have you had enough?" And if the answer is no, he's like, "Well, okay, come back later." And you're out the door. It doesn't matter if you got the cash, you're gone. And until you can honestly look at this person and say, "Yeah, dude, I've had enough. I am sick. I'm sick of being sick. I'm sick of the lie." Until you can honestly say that to another human, it's not going to work. So yeah, it's easier sometimes to live the lie hungover or medicated or a million other ways than to awkwardly and painfully step into the truth.
So here we are. I think a lot of it is because of the unconditional love of your parents. You're sitting here today because, right, they were hopefully instrumental. It seems like that in your mindset. So I want to talk about, first of all, I want to talk about the physical process. So here you're basically burned your entire body. Your odds of surviving are very, very low. What happens? What's the journey?
There's a lot to that answer, but succinctly, 5.5 months in hospital. And what we were doing then was skin grafts. They took all of the skin from my body, from my scalp. So my face and scalp are not burned. The rest of me is, if you can imagine. So they took all the skin to slowly piece me back together from the top of my head, which is miraculous. They had to amputate my fingers. We went through dozens of surgeries, came home, then had years of therapy, learning how to walk again, how to hold a fork again, how to live again, how to return to school again, and how to be ultimately, physically, relatively speaking, normal again. So I do not identify as someone with a disability. Although I have scars from my neck to my toes, although I'm missing my fingers on both hands, I am fully able. And the reason I'm able to work in the construction industry, which I did for 10 years and now travel the world as a speaker and an author and a podcast host and change diapers like you. I have 4 children and was responsible for those nighttime feeds and diaper changes and supporting my wife. And all that is the result of a mother and a father who looked at a child who had every excuse and every reason in the world to have excuses, and then would look at him with love and say, "No, you don't. You don't have an excuse in the world. You are loved. You have opportunity. We believe in you." They're the reasons why I learned how to eat again. They're the reasons why I learned how to play the piano again. And they're the reasons why I learned how to ultimately live again. Now, there's a difference between avoiding death and choosing to live. And it goes back to living in the lie that you referenced a moment ago. But it would have been very easy to just kind of shut the front door, pull the drapes, and live an addicted, broken life. And I don't think anyone would have blamed a fellow who got burned on his entire body if he chose that path. But unfortunately for me, my parents refused to allow that to happen. So when I told you at the introduction, people will be underwhelmed by O'Leary by the end of this, but they will be overwhelmed by leadership and love's ability to influence positive change, even in my life. And if that's true in my life, it's true in yours.
Yeah, I mean that's what we try to do. Try to empower each person, one person at a time. A mentor of mine said, one act of goodness and kindness. It's like action. There's a world of action. You think, what can you do? That's what it is. That's what it is. I know so many people are looking for meaning and purpose. You got to start. That's the thing. People don't realize they got to start. But I also know that it took your parents a long time to even talk about what happened. Eventually, they wrote a book. But what was going on? I mean, I'm sure you've talked to them about it during that time. Maybe they were just trying to get a hold of their emotions and try to just make sense of the whole thing. I mean, what was going on with them during this process afterwards?
We were living, man. My dad was a business owner. My mom was a teacher and raising 6 kids. We won't go through all the challenges that every child had, but needless to say, John, your guest today, is not the only one that had some difficulties going through life. Every one of my siblings had a few things going on or a lot of things. So mom was parenting and dad was parenting and they were staying married, and then dad gets Parkinson's disease and loses the business, and life is just quickly unfolding in front of us. And then what ultimately changed for them was at least two things. Number one is my father lost his job, came home, and at about that same time, one of his kids got married. That kid's name was John, and his wife was Beth. And so they come into this church and they have 450 friends around them, and they're seated in the front row, I think on the right-hand side. And the in-laws are on the left-hand side, and all the good-looking guys are on the right, and all the pretty girls are on the left. And then their son walks out with my brother Jim saved my life the day I was burned. So he walks out right behind me as my best man. And there's this train of other of guys right behind them, all lined up to support us. And then these girls, 4 of them were my sisters. One of them was my wife's sister. And then my beautiful bride walks down the aisle, and they realize, probably for the first time in their lives, how the story ends. This tragic childhood fire that burned us all, not just me. We all got hit by that one, because life never happens in a vacuum. Ends up in this moment of celebrating life. So we exchange vows, we go to the party, we sit back some champagne and go off to Hawaii afterwards. And as I come home, I realize my mom and dad are starting to write a book about their life story. And as they go through what they're writing, it turns out that the life story is actually about one of their kids named John. So it's the unauthorized biography of John O'Leary's life. My father and mother wrote it, I think, in like 33 days. So like, it's a pretty quick read. Ultimately, they print it. They publish 100 copies, Moshe, and it went quickly. So they printed 100 more and then 100 more. It is sold now, I think, 80,000 copies. What would happen then is people would say, gosh, dude, what a story. Like, why'd you never tell anybody? And then I would make every excuse in the world why I never told anybody how I got burned. But then people would say, well, would you share with our group? Would you tell that story live? And my first group was 3 Girl Scouts. So it did not begin on some big podcast or, the MGM Grand in Vegas. It started with 3 little girls in 3rd grade, a yes to a room father. And then on the way out that day, after I failed terribly at the first keynote, one of the dads pulls me aside and says, John, that's a story, man. Would you share that at Rotary? So I'm sure. I'd never even heard of Rotary, but I'll go. And then Kiwanis, and then a Chamber of Commerce, and then a very long story made far shorter. Over the last 16 years or so, we've shared now 2,500 times in front of a couple million people live, millions more virtually, 50 states, dozens of countries. A story that we didn't want as ours. We didn't sign up for that. We didn't imagine recovering so one day I could become a keynote speaker. We recovered with the help of my parents and community and doctors and nurses and staff and grace to live a normal life. And for a long time, we lived a normal life, but a very ordinary life. The call of all of our lives, though, is to live through our gifts and talents extraordinarily well. I have in my office where I'm recording this, to my right is a picture of Martin Luther King Jr. Yeah. And in like 1966, I think he spoke up in Philadelphia to a group of middle school age kids in a broken down, beat down neighborhood of kids who were beat down by society. And he shared with them the gift of work. And if you are called, kids, he's looking at an audience, to be a street sweeper. And then he goes on to say, man, sweep those streets so well that all the hosts of heaven will stop and say, there lived a great street sweeper who swept his streets well. And the amazing thing about this is when King is sharing, the kids in the auditorium are clapping. Now we would mock people who'd say, if you're called to be a street sweeper, like, that's not my calling. I'm called to be great. Yeah, King understood that. But whatever the work that you are called to do it great, do it well, and watch what happens when you do that. So I recognize now the call of my life is to live out the talents that I've received well, and to multiply that and to remind others that they are called to that same high level. Whatever you've got, do it well.
If you're just joining us, you're listening to the Common Denominator podcast. My guest is John O'Leary, who was once expected to die and is now teaching others how to truly live. Next week, we're turning the tables, and my good friend Dave Azer is going to put me in the hot seat. We'll talk about how we started the podcast, how we started the company, my wife, my 10 kids, and everything else in between. Make sure to subscribe so you don't miss it. Now, back to the show. When I think about living a life of service, your story, and again I talk about that a lot on the show, is that you had the courage to millions of people to tell your story. The story, and the reason why people hear it is because what's inside is what's outside. And I always think about, if people would realize that is the whole purpose. It's not a side purpose. It's the thing that sits inside of you when nobody's around that you're avoiding is the entire purpose. That's your service. That's why you're here. That's your soul speaking to you. And to put that out into the universe, because it'll never go away. You sit with it. You know what it is, right? It's like pen to paper when you're writing. So I really admire that's you're living that congruent life, and you see it on your face. It's like you probably. What are the feelings that you have living a life of service? Must be the most amazing. You live in gratitude and abundance, and like living in that space of just serving and telling your story.
If I'm reading into your question, first of all, thank you. I think you're doing the same thing. And I think the reason why your listeners tune in droves is because they are modeling the same thing. And they recognize the need in the marketplace for people who are looking and acting differently than what the media is putting out there, or our politicians are beating their drums about repeatedly and beating down the other aisle as they so frequently do. There's a call for service and call for authenticity, true authenticity and love. So, yeah, I have the honor of trying to do that to the best of my abilities. What I've done, and this is maybe a homework assignment for your audience, is to create a mission statement, and not just mission organizationally, but personally. So because after this, you and I are going to say goodbye in a few moments, and I'm going to wrap up the day and race home. I have 4 kids, and I'm tired. It's been a long day. Started super early, but they're going to be outside expecting their dad to shoot baskets. And I promise you, as I pull in the driveway, they are going to think that the only thing I want to do right now is shoot baskets. And by the time I get out of my car, they're going to be right. And then I'm going to come in, and my wife is probably home from work, and we're going to be working on dinner together, then homework together, like life. And then tomorrow we fly out, and life is busy. But to do it well, you need to be focused on what your true north is. And well doesn't mean balance, I don't think. I think it means being in flow. And where you are, be there and do it well. So here's my mission statement. It gets me up early and keeps me out late. I choose to thrive because. So that ought to be all of it ought to begin with not just like I choose to endure another crappy day. No. Your day's not crappy unless you choose it to be crappy. I choose to thrive because. And here's mine. God demands it. My family deserves it. The world is starved for it. Let's roll. No excuses. Yeah. So that little statement animates my life. I choose to thrive because God demands it. Family deserves it. The world, read the headlines, is starved for it. Get to know someone, hear their story. They are starved for it. Let's roll. It's language I borrow from an actual hero, not some author, but an actual hero who did something. Let's roll. And then finally, no excuses. Because, man, I'm tired. My body hurts. I don't feel like it. I have too much. I have too little. I'm too old. I'm too young. I make excuses for anything, me. But I think we give too much power, to our feelings. If you want to get yourself out of some like negative self-talk, move. Watch what happens when you turn your attention or you move your legs and you focus on somebody else. So no excuses, John. You got to step forward and serve.
I think that when you, like you're saying, point to true north, we all have different fears which stop us from movement. You're talking about physical, literally physical movement. But if you have, And I think many people are looking for that meaning. And again, it's that thing that sits on you. That's why you're not going to be able to find it, because you're not at least being honest to yourself when nobody's around. Start with that. I always think about like that pen to paper. That is
Right.
right. That's the beginning of your true north. And then everything dissipates, because then that's your entire emotion, entire passion. See, emotion could have been negative. There is no negative or positive. It's just energy, right? So you just, if you could bring it and harness it and bring it the other way, flip it on its head and bring it towards positive, right? Which would be unbelievable. I know. I know. Also, you wrote two books, On Fire and In Awe. What are, I guess the book On Fire was about your story. Is that
Only kind of. I mean, it is about my story. It's really about living a life on fire. And when they created the jacket cover for this, they had a picture of me on the front of it wearing a suit, and my arms are crossed, and this Midwestern Irishman is looking out at the reader like, "Hey, if you read this, maybe you too will be great one day." So I wrote back and I said, "Hey guys, read the book, because it's really not about me. Really read what that book is about." So when they redesigned the jacket, it's not my photo on the front. It's letters that say On Fire, but the letters are made out of, it's called foil wrap, made out of smoky red and oranges and yellows, so that actually when you hold up a copy of On Fire, you can see yourself. The whole idea was that you recognize the hero we're going to be celebrating in this book is you. That's what we want to unpack. And so, we leverage stories and lessons within that book. But what I wanted our audience to recognize is, man, you're called to greatness, but act like it. Serve, show up, watch what happens. So that's On Fire. And it came out 5 years ago. It's been printed in more than a dozen languages. It's a cool book about life. And that doesn't mean easy. You talked about positive or negative. Man, there was a lot of negative, a lot of struggle. But gosh, thank heavens for it, because it has led to something powerful in our lives because of it, not in spite of it, specifically and directly because of the struggle. And then what that allowed us to do, though, is to build demand really for speaking. So I through that book, just been traveling a lot around the world. And what I've encountered is when I'm in front of kids, they were so alive. So when I go into little schoolhouses, no matter where in the world, these little ones, when I ask a question, their hands pop up. They smile more frequently. They love each other more easily. They engage in games. Like they love life. And then I would leave the schoolhouses and go to the boardrooms and the big conference centers and the big arenas. And dude, it takes some coercing to really get people to participate. Like they're just beat down by the day. Life has been hard. Look at their face. Ask them. So I wondered what it was that kids have that we lose sight of, and how do we return to it? So In Awe is ultimately about returning to childlike wonder and joy for life, because it's there for the taking. It's who were we before someone told you, no, you're not.
Yeah, I think about that a lot. And, so many systems take away that wonder, that creativity. But that is what evolves in a positive way the world. We should never lose that. I actually tell my wife, I've been down. I'm 42. I've been to law school, business school, the whole, I've seen a lot, and I think actually I'm like, no, it's not us adults that have it right. It's the kids.
Right.
It's our kids that have it right, and we're just most adults are just trying to fit these kids in these boxes that
Yes.
they themselves don't necessarily want to be in. That's actually what's happening. So it's amazing. I wanna ask you, what is something that comes to you in the moment that you're deeply most grateful for?
I mean, the first thing is I believe in a God who made me in his image and loves me, no matter how bad I screw up, which is frequent. And so the very first answer I came up to for me is heaven. Like I believe at some point I will die, and I will then return to this perfect living with family and friends and Jesus and my creator, and all the struggles of this world will pass. It's like, for me, like that just brings such peace. It's like everybody else, I have bad days. I'm in physical pain. I struggle sometimes. I get jet lagged. I deal with dirty dishes and dirty diapers, but to know where the story ends, dude, that is liberating. So that's the first thing. The second thing is family, health. I'm looking at you right now. I see you, you see me, I hear you. Like, have you ever thought about how complex the eye is? It's crazy. And we take it for granted. As you and I are talking, our office is near a school building, and these doggone kids are so loud that I can't even block the noise out of my office, even a studio. Thank heavens, man. Like, I get to hear kids play on the playground all day long. That screaming of joy. I'm grateful for that today. I mentioned a moment ago, I travel tomorrow for work again, but I get to go home tonight. And I get to go home to 4 relatively healthy kids who relatively love their dad and their beautiful mom who said "I do" to me 19 years ago. So I have a practice of gratitude in the morning. So the list I'm sharing with you is only partial. It is long and growing each day.
And it should. I love that. I love that you do that. I love that you create that list. I think that's a great practice for everybody. Things that you're grateful for, because you become what you are, which is, right, you're setting up your day and what you focus on that gratitude. So appreciate it. And what is something that people don't know about you?
I'm introverted. I hate interviews. I don't like speaking. I've spoken 2,500 times, millions of people, and have butterflies every time. I struggle with self-worth, self-confidence, which is all odd things for a guy who's got a couple best-selling books and a big podcast and a big, all the stuff. You would think, wow, I bet this man really has it figured out. And the reality is no. Learning, sojourning, struggling, failing, but doing better today than I did yesterday. Yeah. So that's probably something that people who really know me well know, that I prefer quiet and family, and people who really know me know that. But because I also love life and I see a crisis of life, 1.4 million Americans attempted suicide last year. Like, this isn't like, wow, that's bad. No, this is chronic and it is crisis level. So I got to get over myself and introversion and insecurity and get out there on the road to make a difference, to remind people the dignity and the value of their life, number one. And as importantly, the life of the person to their left and right, regardless of their gender, sexual orientation, political affiliation, where they worship. I don't really care. I want to remind people that their life matters. And if you believe that, then so does the life of the next person.
I'm going to let you in also on a little secret that the audience probably doesn't know about me. I'm actually also naturally an introvert. So I joined that club. So I know.
Welcome, dude. Nothing more powerful than a redeemed introvert, because then they share because they want to make sure they move others.
Yeah. And really, thank you so much for sharing your story and coming on the show. How can the audience learn more about you?
Well, they can probably go to johnolearyinspires.com. So johnolearyinspires.com. That's where we have a link to the Live Inspired podcast and our books, social media, and even like an email. Like, we want to serve. So we always, if you're struggling seriously, or you have a child who is, or you read a headline about a kid who got burned or dealing with crisis or trauma, email me, because our hand is held high and like, we're all in, man. I'm with you today, very much, far more so because of what people did for me than what I did for myself. And so if I can come along somebody else who's struggling and encourage them, like, dude, yeah, that's what we want to do. We want to serve.
Thank you so much, John. Really, it's been amazing.
Honored, man. Well done. I'm grateful to be one more of your guests.
Hope you enjoyed my conversation with John. Next week, my good friend Dave Azer puts me in the hot seat, and I'm going to be a guest on my own show. We'll talk about how I started my business, the not-for-profit work we do, my wife, my 10 kids, and everything else in between. Please subscribe to the show so you don't miss an episode, and follow me on social media at @Popack. Have a great day, and I'll talk to you again soon.